Recently spent a few days in New Hampshire where I had a chance to go to a Donald Trump breakfast. And one of the questioners asked about the whole Black Lives Matter, about how police are picking on black people for no reason whatsoever and killing them for no reason whatsoever. Why don't we compare and contrast Trump's response with the response from Marco Rubio and lots of people's hero, not mine, Rand Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Trump, for coming.
Okay, go ahead.
My name is Joel Gill. I'm from the New Hampshire Institute of Art. Last year, by all accounts, ISIS killed 3 people, and the police killed 1,100. And a lot of the 1,100 people look a lot like me. And I wonder what your thoughts are about the increasing militarization of the police force.
Well, I happen to think the police are not being treated properly in this country. I think that along with the vets, along with certain groups, these are tremendous people, and I've dealt with them, and I guess I've dealt with them more in the last 6 months than I've ever dealt with them before. You know, it's been an amazing experience for me. And I've seen people that are so dedicated, and you're always going to have a problem. You know, no matter what business you go in, you're going to have a problem. Somebody was stupid about something, and it's terrible. And you're going to have that, and we'll see that sometimes on television. And, you know, the sad part is you see that, but you don't see the millions of great acts and, you know, all of the positive things that are done. But I happen to think that I've met some of the finest people just dealing with the police forces throughout the country that I'm dealing with. I mean, here, they've been unbelievable the way they've treated me here. And, you know, you just feel safe. You come into these, sometimes I'll go into an arena with 22,000 people, and you'll see these police come out, and they have great love and great respect, and you know, I've had a great relationship with them, and they're doing a really good job, and I know they can do even a better job. A lot of the genius has been taken away from them by politicians. But I really do feel, and I think it's important, that we cherish our police, that we respect our police, that we let them do what they have to do. You know, you look at some areas, you look at some places, and the crime is rampant, and you know that it can be stopped, or it could be largely stopped. So I just think that we have to just love our police forces and what they stand for, because believe me, they are really amazing people, and they're hard-working people, and they do an amazing job. So.
A few months ago on Fox News, Marco Rubio was asked a slightly different version of the same question. He answered it by saying, well, he has lots of black friends, and this happens to them, so he knows that Black Lives Matter is a legitimate movement. Well, let's take a look at what he said. But first, let's take a look about what another senator said about what his black friend was telling him.
T-Bone comes to me after I get elected and says to me, Corey, can we go for a ride? And I say, T-Bone, your car or mine? And I very nervously get into his car, and we drive off of Martin Luther King Boulevard up South Orange Avenue. And South Orange Avenue is one of the stranger streets in America, because as soon as you punch out of Newark, it's suddenly like going in the Wizard of Oz, from black and white to Technicolor. And suddenly there's these huge homes. In fact, children from Newark's parents who live just maybe 100 yards away, sometimes they'll use false addresses in South Orange or Montclair to sneak their children into the better schools. And those towns have people that follow around these minority children, see where they're going home, and then we'll remove them, send them back to Newark schools, and bill them for the tuition for the time that they took them there. This is a wonderful country we live in. And so we drove into South Orange, and we pull over to the side of the road, and I sit there, and T-Bone tells me, you got to get me out of here. And I'm like, okay, T-Bone, I got some programs, some plans. You see, we at that point had gotten the drug dealers away from the front of the building. We at that point had gotten the slumlord convicted in federal court. Ms. Jones danced that day. We got the local school adopted by Prudential. We now have a health center there. We got the crack house torn down. And now here's T-Bone, to me, feeling incredibly confident. He says to me, you got to help me get out of here. And I'm like, T-Bone, I got some programs, some plans, I know some things we can do. He goes, you don't understand something. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, and he basically explains to me that he has warrants out for his arrest and that they're closing in on him. And I hadn't seen him for a few weeks, and I'm now listening to him tell me this story. And suddenly T-Bone starts telling me his story, which again is the same story for the first 12 years or so of my dad's first 12 years. Born to a single mother, born poor. My father used to say, I can't afford to be, when I was young, I couldn't afford to be poor. I was just Po, P-O. The other two letters, couldn't afford them yet. Same thing. Him and his mother had him. Mother couldn't take care of him. My father's, my grandmother, biological grandmother, couldn't take care of my dad. They both were taken into the community. The community that was absorbed T-Bone was community gang members. And T-Bone's life spiraled down from there. Here he's telling me this story about his childhood, going through it in detail, and I'm not hearing him anymore. I'm looking at my dad, a guy who's evidenced more genius than me, a guy that was controlling a business, probably making more revenue than I'll ever control in a business. And sitting there looking at each other, he's telling me the story, I'm off thinking about my dad and how that this glorious movement, the civil rights movement that began to make real on the American promise, had gotten twisted to the point that there we were sitting there, two young black men sitting there looking at each other. And I began to think to myself, you know what, this guy looks like me. This guy could be my dad. And suddenly he looks at me, snapping me back to focus with the same ferocity with which he threatened my life. Same ferocity. And then he says to me, and he bursts into tears and starts crying, this powerful, macho, young black male sobbing into my dashboard. And then Barbara Jordan came back to me, because the rest of the quote there is simple. She says, we live in a distraught present. Though we've had the courage to deplore it, we've failed to heal the rift that exists between the middle-class black lawyer and the urban dweller. That rift between me and T-Bone was inches. We sat there, but I felt so alienated that there was a gulf as wide as the Grand Canyon between us, and I could not reach out to save this young man. We drove back down to Brick Towers. He got out of the car, and I've never seen him again since that day.
It is a fact that in the African American community around this country, there has been for a number of years now a growing resentment towards the way law enforcement and the criminal justice system interacts with the community. It is particularly endemic among young African American males that in some communities in this country have a much higher chance of interacting with criminal justice. Than higher education. We do need to face this. It is a serious problem in this country. There are a lot of different reasons for it. Not all of them have governmental answers, but it is something we need to confront, because you have a significant percentage of our population that feels that they are locked out of the promise of this country, and the result is the anxiety and the frustration that you're now seeing expressed. Look, I personally know people who are professionals, who are African American males. I have one friend in particular who's been stopped in the last 18 months, 8 to 9 different times. Never got a ticket for being stopped, just stopped. If that happened to me after 8 or 9 times, you know, I'd be wondering what's going on here. I'd be upset about it. So would anybody else. I've seen it, not just in that instance, but even growing up. It has to be confronted, but it may not necessarily have a federal bill that we can pass that can fix all this. This is a problem our nation has to confront because it is real.
But do you understand, I don't have a full understanding of what these particular protesters want other than capturing the spotlight.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what they're asking.
Well, I don't think they have a detailed policy plan they want us to carry out. And as I said, some of it doesn't have governmental solutions. Look, if you're arrested, if you're a 19-year-old young minority male, African American or Hispanic, you're arrested, you're probably going to get, if you don't have any money, you're going to get public defenders, and they're going to push you towards a plea deal because they're handling 1,000 cases. You now have a record, which means you are now stigmatized in the eyes of employers, in the eyes of your future, etc. So I do think that one of the things that we have to do at the state level and potentially at the federal level is look for ways to divert people early on in first offenses, obviously not a violent crime, so that you don't get people stigmatized early in life with a criminal justice record that basically begins to lock them out. And once you incarcerate someone, their chances of repeating offenses in the future begin to climb, because you're now basically housing them with criminals that they're learning the tools of the trade, etc. We do need to address it, and it is particularly troubling among young African-American males. So I think there's a lot of different factors, and I've done some work on it. You know, here in New York, the Harlem's Children's Zone, for example, has an incredible record in a geographic area of improving outcomes. That is one aspect of a much broader set of things we need to do. I don't know if this group has a detailed policy agenda, but it is a legitimate issue.
We've both felt the sting of those daily slights throughout our entire lives. The folks who crossed the street in fear of their safety. The clerks who kept a close eye on us in all those department stores. The people at formal events who assumed we were the help. And those who have questioned our intelligence, our honesty, even our love of this country. And I know that these little indignities are obviously nothing compared to what folks across the country are dealing with every single day. Those nagging worries that you're going to get stopped or pulled over for absolutely no reason. The road ahead is not going to be easy. It never is, especially for folks like you and me. Because while we've come so far, the truth is that those age-old problems are stubborn. And they haven't fully gone away. And all of that is going to be a heavy burden to carry. It can feel isolating. It can make you feel like your life somehow doesn't matter. That you're like the invisible man that Tuskegee grad Ralph Ellison wrote about all those years ago. And as we've seen over the past few years, those feelings are real. They're rooted in decades of structural challenges that have made too many folks feel frustrated and invisible. And those feelings are playing out in communities like Baltimore and Ferguson and so many others across this country.
For too long, we've been blind to the way past injustices continue to shape the present. That's right. Perhaps we see that now. Perhaps this tragedy causes us to ask some tough questions about how we can permit so many of our children to languish in poverty, or attend dilapidated schools, or grow up without prospects for a job or for a career. Perhaps it causes us to examine what we're doing to cause some of our children to hate. Perhaps it softens hearts towards those lost young men, tens and tens of thousands caught up in the criminal justice system, and lead us to make sure that that system's not infected with bias, that we embrace changes in how we train and equip our police so that the bonds of trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve make us all safer and more secure. Maybe we now realize the way racial bias can infect us even when we don't realize it. So that we're guarding against not just racial slurs, but we're also guarding against this subtle impulse to call Johnny back for a job interview but not Jamal.
On a violent rampage, a group of kids in Milwaukee are caught on video beating a woman with a stick.
And later hitting another woman with a car. 63-year-old woman appears to be intentionally hit Tuesday afternoon near 40th and Lisbon. Tell us it was part of a violent outburst from a group of teenagers. The woman survived. The incident was captured on cell phone video by someone across the street. Milwaukee police hope this video will provide help in their investigation as they search for the driver of the vehicle.
She was an older lady, so I felt so bad for her.
If that wasn't bad enough, police say a fight preceded this crash. This altercation was also captured in the same video and posted on Facebook. Investigators tell Fox 6 a woman standing in this yard was beaten with a stick. She ran away moments later.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's what's her love.
Excuse me. Oh. Get over. Let's go. Stop.
Rubio Sarman says her family feels trapped inside their Brownsville, Brooklyn apartment, scared of the neighborhood.
My mom, she's an innocent person. She just went to work.
Afina Akhtar came to this park on Sunday night to walk the track to get some exercise. She thought that she'd be safe because 2 other family members were sitting in the park. After entering Carter G. Woodson Children's Park at Christopher and Sutter Avenues, Akhtar describes walking around the track.
She walked around again, and the girl just come with, I think, 3 batch, and he hit her. She hit my mom.
Around 7:30 at night on Sunday, Akhtar says a group of teen girls ages 13 to 15 yelled something at her.
She understood that they say hit belly and head. After that, she said no.
Akhtar continued to walk the track, and that's when she says one of the girls ran up and hit her in the head with a tree branch.
Top story now. Police are investigating yet another tragedy in the Shaw neighborhood in D.C. The most recent violence yesterday when a graduate of American University was gunned down. Police us live with more information on the investigations. Right.
Well, Mike, they have identified the victim as 23-year-old Matthew Castrol Schlonsky of Northeast. He was gunned down yesterday at 5 o'clock right here in the 1800 block of 7th Street, right outside of the Shaw Howard University metro station in Northwest.
So I have to confess, I'm not a big fan of Marco Rubio. I mean, I'm not one way or the other. But for you people who are, did he always talk like a weasel? Wow. Okay, here's a question for his black friend who's keeping him informed on what the brothers are up to, keeping it real. Why is black crime so wildly out of proportion? All over the country, no matter what cockamamie scheme people like Marco Rubio come up to. Can one of Marco Rubio's friends answer me that question? Love to hear it. If you can't, maybe one of you should send him a copy of Don't Make the Black Kids Angry.
It's really focused the issue on criminal justice and other issues. He's one of the few candidates who actually has talked about Black Lives Matter. And so in our conversation, we will talk about that issue.
The president and I don't get along on very many issues, but we're in complete agreement on the criminal justice. The president and I don't get along on very many issues, but we're in complete agreement on the criminal justice. The president and I don't get along on very many issues, but we're in complete agreement on the criminal justice.
Let's talk criminal justice. What we're seeing now is, and I want to get, what are your thoughts about the Black Lives Matter movement? I believe what you've seen is you've seen this movement force a level of transparency and change we have not seen when it comes to law enforcement ever. 40 new laws passed in 24 states. You see NYPD all of a sudden, cops have to now mark excessive force. You're seeing body cameras. Yet the movement is constantly being attacked, I think, because, frankly, they're forcing change.
Well, you know, I'm for most of the change, and I'm for most of the things they have supported. I'm for the, you know, the cameras. I worked with Congressman Scott on reports of deaths in the hands of custody. I thought the Eric Garner case and all of these other cases were just real tragedies. The only thing I've hesitated with making it all about race is when you look at the war on drugs and you look at incarceration, there is a racial disparity, no question, and it is a problem we need to address. But when you look at policing, and like I read one the other day, someone was thrown to the ground and treated, I think, awfully. But one of the policemen was black. Police chief was black. So if we make it all about race, we're going to mistake the problem. What we really need to understand...
For police is blue, because you're right. I mean, look, you have police officers who are African American. There are some in the Freddie Gray case in Baltimore who were indicted. Right. So that's what I'm saying. I don't necessarily think Black Lives Matter is about white cops versus African Americans, although you do hear that. Right. I think it's a question literally of just law enforcement, this culture, this attitude where it's protect blue, where it's protect and serve. A lot of times themselves versus the public.
Right, but what I would say is it's more it's police behavior, but there are a lot of good police too.
Yes.
And then there's also it's policymakers. So I tend to it's sort of like when something happens bad in war, the soldier's responsible maybe for something that happens, but really the policymakers responsible for putting in that position. Eric Garner, for example, the mayor wants tax money and they don't want you selling illegal cigarettes, a huge financial thing. Mayor de Blasio has been a big part of that, but he doesn't want to accept the blame for his policy. He instructed the police to take people down. Now, he didn't instruct them to kill Eric Garner, but he did instruct the police, we're going to take down, we're going to have a zero tolerance for cigarettes. He didn't even have any cigarettes on him. It was ridiculous, and nobody deserves to die that way. But the thing is I blame the policymakers who are like, let's have the police stopping rapists and murderers, and some guy wants to sell a cigarette on the corner, let's give him a ticket. You know, if it has to be against the law, give him a ticket. If he comes back, give him another ticket. If it comes back, I mean, there's a lot of other ways to treat this other than saying we're going to have a zero tolerance and we're going to use force against somebody selling cigarettes on the sidewalk.
But do you believe that the Black Lives Matter movement has forced the kind of accountability that has been positive for the country?
They're drawing attention to issues that need to be drawn to. And like I say, I support almost all the criminal justice. The president and I don't get along on very many issues, but we're in complete agreement on the criminal justice. And when the president's trying to fix some of the crack versus powder cocaine disparity in jail.
Because it's still 18-1.
Yeah, I'm supportive not only of what he's doing, he's releasing some of the people who are nonviolent criminals, but I would change it to 1-to-1. And in fact, when the criminal justice bill comes forward, they don't have it in the current bill. I will try to amend that. I'm also going to try to make some felonies to misdemeanors. I'm also going to try to allow some of the expunging of records that Senator Booker and I have worked on. So there's a lot of good stuff. The only thing I don't want to do is and I think it misunderstands, because I have a lot of policemen that protect me. Many of them are African American, and I ask them about it, and they don't want to make it about race, because obviously they're black, patrolling black. It's what we have to do is change the law about the war on drugs. There's no reason we should be arresting everybody for marijuana, because what happens is the police go into the inner city and then they're arresting. So the arrests end up being 15 black kids to 1 white kid, but the surveys show white kids smoking pot just as much as black kids. But the police are always in that area. And it isn't overtly say, oh, let's go round up black kids. It just happens they're in a poorer neighborhood and there's a higher percentage of African Americans there.
Last question for you. You have been demanding that Republican Party do more in terms of reaching out to African Americans. I've been saying Republicans got to stop being afraid to talk to black people, visit with black folks. Should there be a Republican forum? Town hall, if you will, that specifically is speaking to issues of African Americans, of these various candidates, to talk about these issues that frankly you're not going to be brought up by CNN, MSNBC, or Fox.
If we were smart, we would do it. And I've been trying to go places, because you know what I find all the time? People aren't jumping up and down and saying, when I go to the south side of Chicago, not everybody's coming up and saying, hey, I want to be a Republican. But you know, they're saying, you know what, we want somebody to compete for our vote. The Democrats take us for granted, and they never come down here anyway, because they know we're all going to vote Democrat. We're not sure we're a Republican yet, but we do want to hear some new and different ideas, and we want people to compete for our vote. I hear the same thing in Louisville, and I'm excited about it. You know, I might go from 5% to 10% of the African American vote, or maybe 20%, but I want to make inroads, because really I want to represent, particularly in my state, everyone.
Well, there you have it. All the weasel words, the backtracking, the hedging, but the message comes through. Both Rubio and Rand Paul agree that black people are relentless victims of relentless white racism all the time, everywhere. That explains everything, especially why cops are always picking on black people for no reason whatsoever. Trump had the opportunity to take the same position. He didn't. Good for him. This is Colin Flaherty. I'm the author of Don't Make the Black Kids Angry, where I document all these racial black on white fairy tales. Hope you get a chance to check it out.